Half-Life 2 was released nearly 12 years ago, yet it is still talked about. The game is barely aged, and if it came out today, it would still feel the same resounding praise it got in 2004. But have you ever wondered, what led up to this? What was lost before we ever saw the final product? It was 1998. This is where the story began. Gabe Newell and his employees had just hit a gold mine. They had just released Half-Life, a critically acclaimed masterpiece which went on and shaped the gaming industry as a whole, and practically invented the idea of storytelling in games. Almost instantly people were wondering what would be next. What could Valve create that's better than Half-Life? What could be next? And aside from Half-Life Blue Shift and some other mods, Valve stayed quiet about Half-Life until 2003. In 2003, Valve demoed another thing that had never been seen before. They once again showed something revolutionary, Half-Life 2. Instantly the audience was taken aback by the huge technological improvement. Valve themselves were aware of this by taking an old model from 1998 and fading it with the new model of G-Man from 2003. Valve showed off the face animation technology present in the Source engine, something so detailed it looked like real life to the E3 2003 audience. Valve showed off new physics technologies, something hardly present in mainstream gaming, yet another thing to build up excitement for Half-Life 2. The hype for Half-Life 2 was insane, something never seen before. In countries where piracy is rampant like Russia and China, fake copies of Half-Life 2 are being sold that contain malware or pornographic imagery. Soon, the hype was causing thousands to be infected with computer viruses or false promises of a game being released early. On May 7th, 2004, a man by the name of Axel Gembe, please tell me I'm saying that right, was able to hack and leak Valve's internal server data, causing upwards of $250 million in damages for Valve.
One of the biggest challenges we've had in developing Half-Life 2 was the theft and release of the source code to the game on the internet.
That was a dark day for us at Valve.
So it started with me being perplexed by the behavior of my PC. It's like, hey, why is my PC doing this? So I ended up reformatting my hard drive and just sort of saying, well, okay, hopefully that was some strange transient phenomenon. But then we continued to see sort of odd behavior in our network.
Some of our internal communication showed up on the internet.
And at that point, we were pretty sure that we were compromised. So we disconnected ourselves from the internet. The people who had broken in and had ongoing access to our network decided that, okay, the jig is up, and that's when they started posting all sorts of email.
Within a space of just a few hours, when we started seeing screenshots of our game show up online and even source code for the game engine itself.
Among the data was a beta for Half-Life 2. This ended up being a super crucial leak, and it is responsible for all the information we have on Half-Life today. So let's take a dive and see what was lost in the creation of Half-Life 2. So barely any of the E3 presentations worked the way they did when they were on display. This could be because of the plethora of missing scripts, or it could be because some of the E3 content was embellished. Some of the physics sequences were scripted for the E3 showcase, but that's typical of game companies to build scripted events coming as part of in-game mechanics. The first map is this scene where they show the new G-Man model and facial animations. The map is just a single arrow and a sliding platform now. The second map is a physics room. The beginning floor mesh isn't animated like it was in E3, leaving a ghost town of a map, but the physics do work. The third room is essentially the benchmark from Counter-Strike Source, but broken. Most of the E3 maps crashed the game upon launch. There are many other test maps in these files, though, that do function to some degree. Many of the test maps feature the capabilities to have dynamic ground meshes, something not available in the Gold Source engine. There are many interesting tests where you can see the Rebel AI and the Citizen AI. This shows that the AI was somewhat far along by E3 2003. Some of the maps for E3 are maps that exist in Half-Life 2 with very little difference, like E3_lab, which shows Kleiner's lab in a nearly finished state. Aside from some errors, this map is nearly identical to the final product. Some scripted sequences were taken out though. The early Rivenholm E3 maps were some of the most intact demos in the leak, featuring physics sequences present in the demos. In the original leaked files, you can find a very early version of the train station we saw in the final version, but with key differences. To start with, there is a guy who talks to you on the train, unlike the silent passengers in the final game.
Do I know you from somewhere? I seem to.
This place is just like the last one. Who cares?
This might just be a test audio clip though. Along with some different uniforms and some muddier textures, we can see that the general layout is quite different, yet the Metrocop dialogue is mostly unchanged. One of the most interesting parts of the map, I think, is the line where Barney tells you to look for citizens with lambdas.
Look for citizens wearing a lambda. Talk to them and they'll help you on your way.
This shows that there once might have been a system where undercover rebels who are getting by as citizens could help you, unlike the final game where citizens are mostly hopeless. The only remains of this idea is that one citizen who tells you to go while he holds the door closed, giving Gordon enough time to run. In the beta, Barney says something about the human index, another idea that never made it into the final game.
He's not in the human index. Once that registers with the system, there's gonna be trouble.
The only remains of the human index are the flying cameras that take pictures of you in the final game. One of the earliest versions of City 17 I could get working was from the cancelled E3 2002 showing. This one shows that Valve pretty much had a final concept of what City 17 will look like. There are huge differences in terms of the Citadel, but the story was nearly finalized at this point. There are just too many minute story and graphical changes to go over, so I'm just going to go over the big ones. In the beta, you can see entire concepts that ended up getting scrapped, including the Dryad Ocean concept. In the original story, the Combine were sucking the world of its resources, polluting the atmosphere to the point where citizens had gas masks on. This entire concept was scrapped somewhere in 2002 or 2003, but what was left in the leak was quite interesting. Now, I don't have access to these maps myself, I just couldn't get them to run, so I'm going to be borrowing some YouTubers' footage. Credits in the description. The maps developed for this storyline were quite big and extensive, so big in fact that it would give the source engine memory leaks causing the game to lag, but as you can see, this was quite far along. City 17 reflected this story at the time, causing everything to be quite gritty and depressing. Maps would be cloudy and smoggy, and torture and child labor would take place regularly in City 17. Then, things started falling apart. Valve started to add things like the suppression field, which would in turn make the child labor plot impossible. They changed the gritty feel of City 17 to a more Soviet state. That ended up making the Wasteland and Dried Up Ocean feel too gritty in comparison to the beginning of the game, so they ended up scrapping the entire story. Little is known about this old story, but many mods have tried to reconstruct it. In my personal opinion, the grittier tone would have been better. But who knows, it might have been awful. You might never know exactly why Valve scrapped the idea. In the beta, you can find many weapons that never made it into the final game. Valve claimed this is because the playtesters found the surplus of automatic weapons and machine guns to be useless. Most of the guns are nothing special. Most notably, they had the TAU cannon, which is similar to the one found in Half-Life 1. And you have the most famous cut weapon, the AR-2. But it has a model that quite resembles the grittier art style the game had before the rewrite. There were many NPCs that were scrapped. The most famous would be the Cremator, a passive NPC that would set you on fire if you did wrong in City 17. Most of these scrapped NPCs had to do with the grittier theme that they scrapped, except for one, the Hydra. The Hydra is a very famous Half-Life 2 beta NPC that was even featured in promotional material for the game, but for some reason Valve removed it at the last second, seemingly for no reason. Well, that was the end of part 1. Part 2 will be out soon, and part 2 will focus more on smaller changes instead of the broader things. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video. I hope this made a good first video on my channel.